This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
Good evening and welcome to the Monday Late Late Show with me, Toby Doncaster. Tonight, I talk to Matthew Ruddle from Abingdon and Whitney College in Oxfordshire about what makes effective feedback and how we can reach out to our learners and help them develop their language skills and knowledge.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
And hello, good evening, Matthew. I'm so delighted to have you. Matthew, you began teaching in Japan for 3 years in elementary and junior high schools, followed by a stint teaching EFL, if I'm correct, in Oxford, a degree in education and youth studies in the United States, and finally in Abingdon and Whitney College. So tell me, how are you feeling today?
I'm doing great, Toby, thank you. Had a busy day, but I'm okay now. How are you?
Excited to have you on the show. So we're talking about providing feedback to learners. And in your experience, how would you define feedback in the context of education?
I think in its simplest terms, feedback can be defined as a communication between the teacher and the learner, or learners in a group, that provides information to them about how they're progressing with a particular skill or project to enable them to improve on it or to reflect on it in a
Do you see feedback as going both ways then? Is it just us giving feedback to the learners on how to improve, or do you think that they can give something back to us?
I'm sure it goes both ways. It just goes both ways. For teachers, it's a chance to hear from the learners how they're experiencing that particular task or project. And for learners, it's the opportunity for them to reflect on how they're doing, but also to give information back to the teacher, like I just said, to help them perhaps reflect on that as well from a different point of view.
Definitely. So what do you think are the benefits of feedback for learners and for teachers?
For teachers, I would say it's the opportunity to really think about what your learners are producing.
Yes.
For me, I teach English, as you do, so it's more often it's written tasks that we get to read.
Yes.
So it's great to pause and actually see what they've done, as opposed to just talking about it or waiting for them to finish. And for learners,
coming back to teachers, how do you think it benefits? I think we're getting it the wrong way around. It benefits us in that we're able to see how they're doing and thinking, okay, so in the next lesson or during the lesson, I'm going to adjust what I'm actually trying to teach them. And I suppose, I think we've discussed that. I mean, for learners, they've got the opportunity to see how well they're doing and what they could do to improve.
Exactly.
How often do you think teachers should be offering feedback? Do you think offering feedback on every single piece of work is a good thing?
I think it can be. I mean, I know for myself, I try and give feedback on most pieces of writing that are produced, but in a different way. So sometimes it'll be verbally. I'll talk to them in a lesson about it. Other times it'll be a written comment in their book or a question to them in their book. But it really depends on what they're working on at the moment, I suppose.
I mean, at our college, we're busy doing mocks, so the written feedback component, I think, is quite important. Are you doing mocks as well at the moment?
Yeah, start those today. So I've got the joy of that to look forward to over Easter holidays to mark all that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know about you, but we're given quite strict guidelines of what to do with feedback for mocks and
Oh.
assessments. So we are encouraged to give lots of feedback on the extended pieces of work. So question 5 in your
Uh-huh.
AQA exams, for example.
Yeah.
Whereas the analytical reading questions, it's more just a mark, as opposed to an in-depth comment. How's it with you in your college?
Well, yeah. I mean, we're offering feedback on what went well, in terms of their, question 5, their writing one,
Mm-hmm.
and also thinking very much about the technical side of things, so the spelling, punctuation, and grammar, and that feeds back again as to what we could be doing, sort of like in the next few weeks, to develop those technical writing skills.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Most of my students actually have, they've got great ideas and they're able to put them across, but they're let down, you know, by not being so coherent, if that makes sense. So I can read it, and if I think about it, it makes sense. But I shouldn't have to think about it too much. It should be quite clear what they're trying to say to me.
Yeah.
And I find that's a real problem. So, apart from written feedback, what other forms of feedback do you give to your student? You've mentioned verbal. Is there anything else that you do?
So I'll explain about verbal a bit more first. We have a stamp, an ink stamp that says verbal feedback given, which we're supposed to stamp into their books when we talk to them. And the idea
Sure.
is that they then write down the comments we've told them, which I'm finding in practice doesn't always work very well. Like you'll say a comment, for example, or have you thought about adding in a semicolon in that sentence, for instance? And they'll see me start in the book, and then they'll just do the task I've told them to do, but they didn't write down what they did. So it's kind of hit and miss. I have tried peer-to-peer feedback with some
Mm,
groups. It varies
mm,
on the group you're with, as you probably know. And that tends to go a lot better with adults than with the teenagers
mm,
that I work with in general,
mm.
because adults tend to be more sort of open to sharing or take it more seriously.
Sure.
Whereas with the teens, I have to kind of provide a very sort of structured approach. I give them part of a mark scheme, for example, to discuss with a partner or something like that. But yeah, verbal, written, and peer are really the main ones
Definitely.
I can think
I,
of.
I find when I give when I ask the adults, or anybody really, I say, could you just have a look at your partner's piece of work and give them some feedback, and they say, what does this mean? I don't understand this, and this is wrong, and that's wrong. There's there's very little positive in what they've got to say to each other.
Mm.
Do you find that's the same thing, or do they give positive feedback as well?
With the adults, well, I'll explain. So I taught adults a couple of years ago. I taught them creative writing. I had one group that was only online for an hour a week, and one group that was in
Wow.
person 2 hours a week.
Hmm.
And I found with both groups, I had to really kind of train them on how to give peer-to-peer feedback. So I had to model it. I gave them written guidelines on things they could say or phrases they could use
Ah,
to kind of
fantastic.
set it up as a positive experience as opposed
Yeah.
to ripping your partner's work to shreds. So I had one learner that was very critical, like too much. So I had to kind of rein them in by giving that framework to use. And the groups that are online, I had them do it in pairs in breakout rooms, so it's kind of private.
Mm.
And I dip into them when I could to get snippets of conversations. Whereas the group I taught in person, I was in the room obviously with them, so I could hear every conversation going on, and it was more natural to kind of mix people up and share ideas, and became part of the lesson that everyone looked forward to. I think to hear each other's piece of writing and to really see the wide variety of stuff they produced from the same prompt, for example.
I like that idea, the idea that you can experience a variety of different perspectives, if you like, different ways of expressing yourself. There's a story. I can't remember who wrote it now. All I remember was that the teacher's name was Mr. Fisher, and he
Hmm.
was marking homework, and he came across a story, and he describes it as finding, a nugget of gold in his boot.
Yeah.
And I love that feeling. You start reading people's work, and then suddenly you come across something, you think, wow, this is fantastic. This is a really stunning piece of work. It's, even today, for example, marking mock papers, somebody came across as being very compelling and very persuasive, and I was just, full of praise about what he achieved. And then I'm like, well, I've given you loads of praise. Now what do I do? How do I get you to develop your writing further? But I couldn't help myself. I got carried away.
Yeah.
And, you know, like, as I was saying, just the idea of people sharing and would, that sounds like something that's I would love to have in my classrooms as well. Um, Apart from verbally sharing work, do you do anything else?
Yes, like you just described, when I find a piece of work that's really outstanding or really inspiring, I will ask the students if I can share it on the screen anonymously. So I'll prepare it for the following lesson on PowerPoint or something
Mm,
and show it as an example answer without revealing who wrote it,
mm,
um,
mm,
to show that people in this room, in this group, are talented and can produce writing like this, which is of a high standard. And we talk through it and pick out the techniques they've used, for example, which makes a great change from me showing something I've written as a model example or showing an examination example. So it's really motivating, I think, for them to see each other's work on the screen, if they don't know whose it is, just to know that someone in the class or in the college has written that.
exactly that. I think there's an idea that well, somebody in the college has managed this. I can manage it as well, and it's
Hmm.
it's I don't. Yeah, I think that is a form of feedback, isn't it? But it's a much more holistic form of feedback, which is that that it's received a sort of a stamp of approval, and
Yeah,
then here is why it's so good. Can you see why it's so good? And it makes things a lot more relevant for everybody else as well. Whereas when you come in with a text that you get from a book and you think, oh, this is so good. And they think, well, I don't understand the context. I don't understand the background. I don't understand anything about it. There's nothing to relate to. And that really does, so to speak, just I find anyway that I'm working very hard just to make it relevant to the learner's interests in the classroom.
yeah,
Whereas, when they produce a piece of work, that hard work has already been done for you.
absolutely.
Yeah, brilliant.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishing professional development books and resources to support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Have you checked out their latest releases? Use the code JCTTR2324 for 20% off your order. Don't miss out. Visit johncattbookshop.com to explore their full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. Happy reading.
So, Matthew, I was just thinking about, offering feedback, and along with that, we offer a grade. And I say that with a sinking heart because I have yet to have a student look at a grade and also look at the feedback and think about how they're going to improve. Do you find that's the case with you? Do they focus on the grade and not on the feedback, or do they focus on both?
Yeah, same really for me, especially with the formal assessments or mocks, going back to them, they straight away trying to find where the grade is on the piece of paper and kind of don't look at the rest. So it is definitely a challenge to try and focus their mind on the feedback, because that will always tell them how to get more marks, which is what they're trying to do, isn't it, in the end?
Yeah, exactly.
So I guess that's why we don't give too much written feedback on the reading section, but focus mainly on question 5, which is worth the most amount of marks. And we know that students
Definitely.
do well question 5 are more likely to pass, aren't they? So
Yes.
I
Yes.
think what I'm trying this time is to focus on question 5 and use that feedback to show them, this is how you gain extra mark here, there, to get that extra boost to go up the next grade boundary. But yeah, they do focus on the grades, which is a shame because that we both know that isn't the be all and end all, is it? It's just part of it.
It isn't. And I think because you're doing resits as am I. I think what I try to encourage with the learners is to take the long view. It might not happen this year, you might not get the grade this year, but what you're trying to do is develop skills and capability. And just out of interest, are your learners great readers at all?
I don't know about some of them. I have tried different ways to find out. One tactic that I've tried is over the course of a year saving up. Well, I should say I run a book swap in my village, a little free library.
Oh,
So I
okay.
often kind of find young adult novels in there that I'll kind of save up over a few months, and then in September, in the first few lessons, I bring this big bag of books in and say, "It's free books. Help yourself to a book. It's yours free to take it away." And usually, if I'm lucky, half the students will pick one and take it away. And my intention was to discuss books, every few weeks, say what you're reading at the moment, but hardly anyone seemed to engage with that. And when I asked them, what do you read? And they're like, "Well, I don't read." I'm like, "Well, you read text messages, and you read Twitter or Snapchat or whatever. You read something on social media." But equally, I'm often surprised when students say, "Oh, I just read this book last week about blah blah blah," and I'm completely taken aback because I've never have imagined them being to
Definitely.
that. For example, I've got a student at the moment who said he loved reading Shakespeare at school, and I would never have thought that from
Wow.
my encounters with him in the classroom. So you never know. But in general, I'd say they're probably not great readers. That's my impression, but I could be wrong.
I actually experienced an interesting situation in my GCSE class last week with this was a key stage 4 group, so they're 15-year-olds, and they'd happened to unearth the Diary of the Wimpy Kid, and they found a whole series somewhere in the classroom. And the next thing I know, I'm trying to teach a lesson, and there's 3 or 4 students, reading these books. And I said, well, what do I do now? Shall I tell you to take your books away? I can't tell you to do that. I'm pretty sure that's blasphemy somehow. And I thought, okay, here's the deal: do the activity that I set for you, and then, as your extension, read your book.
That's amazing.
It was fun, and of course, I thought, well, I can't make it teacher led, so I can't say, write a book review about it, but I will definitely, this week say to them, what did you think of the book? What did you like about it? And so on.
Yeah.
See if we can build some interest that way.
That's amazing. A few years ago, I think about 4 years ago, our college tried to implement silent reading for 10 minutes at the start of
Yes.
every English lesson. But that felt very, forced and unnatural. And I don't think it's very successful, really. Like, students would sit there, but some of them would, sort of glaze over and not really
Yeah.
read.
No, I would have thought so. And I think this is it. English, language really. I mean, it is a natural occurrence, and I think that I think if only we could think of a way of promoting it naturally, and so it brings me back coming back to this feedback loop, is feedback natural, do you think?
That's a good question. I try to make it natural. I try to make it conversational. So I try to put a question in there somewhere, whether it's verbal or written down, to try and make it more of a natural chat, I suppose. And then within that, I'm always trying to boost the students somehow. So sort of praise them for something, or make them aware that they've actually achieved a goal in this piece of writing, no matter how small it is, like something. And then, so it's trying to be naturally encouraging, as I hope I'm anyway, generally try to be. And then also giving them a suggestion of what to do next time to make it better, which I know does feel a bit forced, but yeah, I hope I do try and make it as natural as I can. I mean, giving feedback on mock assessments is very different. That's much more formal, isn't it?
That's right, yeah.
But day to day, I try to be more conversational about it, I think.
I was just wondering, we were discussing how, we do sort of mark as much as we can, so to speak, at every piece of work. And do you find, showing learners where they've started and how far they've come has a positive effect at all, or do they sort of go, meh, so what?
I had a learner actually just last week, funny enough, that I just finished teaching a lesson, and it was the end, and he was the last one in the room. He was like, oh, how are you feeling about the mocks next week? And this is a student that when he started in September, he couldn't do anything. Like, he just had a block with English and would just freeze and just kind of couldn't get started with anything at all. So I was thinking I was going to tell me he's dreading it or was really nervous, but he said, I'm feeling really confident about it. I was like, oh, really? That's great. And before I could say anything else, he's like, he said to me, you've taken the time to show me how to do it with patience, and now I feel much better. And that really took me back, because I wasn't expecting to say it at all. And I said to him, I remember when I first met you, and your work would be a blank page, and we'd sit and talk about things, but nothing would get written down. But now you've come so far that you can produce some written work with, really minimal input from me. So that's a really big achievement. So for him, I felt able to say it to him because he'd raised it in the first place, but also I was like, yeah, actually, you've come really, really far. And I was thinking, if he doesn't get a grade 4, he's still come so far from September. So in that case, yes, showing them, go back to the starting point was really effective. Anyway, quite emotional, I think, for me. Other times, students feel like, I think some students feel like they're kind of stuck at a certain level. And so going back to the beginning doesn't really help them, because it looks the same to them as they are doing now, I suppose. And in some cases, if they've been absent for a long time, it's almost like going backwards.
Definitely.
So I think you have to be careful with how far back you go with that one. But I think in clear case that the guy has mentioned, yes, it's very helpful to reflect back and show them. But other cases, it's a bit trickier. What do you think?
No, I think I've experienced very much the same thing. And I think, being very attentive to what people are actually producing and being aware of every single sort of learner's journey, as it were, is helpful, because, there's going to be the opportunity. I've had the opportunity where, a student started in September by writing a single paragraph, and I've been able to say, actually, you are now writing half a page, which is amazing. And you should really be proud of yourself. You are going to achieve a better grade. You are going to do better for yourself. And lo and behold, it has happened. This is what I was saying about, as teachers, we have to take the very, very sort of long view. It might not happen this year, but it will, progress there shall be progress. Progress will be made.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You know, so yeah. Just talking about peer assessment. You said that for your 16 to 19-year-olds, you give them a sort of a grid, or is it? Have I got that right? Is it like a grid or a framework, or
Uh,
how do you make that work?
Usually it's sort of a slightly simpler version of a mark scheme. It's not the whole mark scheme, obviously, but just like a little table that kind of
Oh yeah, yeah.
lists the basic uh, measuring sticks, which is a better word.
Mm, mm, mm.
So yeah, I use a simple thing like that to encourage or facilitate peer-to-peer feedback, but only in certain groups. Some of them are too big, or there's personality clashes on things doesn't always work. But the ones that I have tried it with has been in that way. And to practice that, I've often given them two model examples, one that's not so great and one that's much better, to help them kind of identify how and why one's better than the other one, and how and why they'll get more marks for it. And then following that, they can try doing that with each other's work. But again, it depends on who they're paired up with. It depends on the dynamics of the group. It's quite hit and miss often, I find. But those groups that do gel, it is really valuable, and I think they get a lot out of it.
So you've mentioned something that's quite contentious. How do you get groups to gel?
Wow.
I'm thinking particularly the 16-year-olds. How does that work? How what is your magic powder?
Magic powder.
Yeah.
Gosh, I wish I had some. Some groups. Well, in my college, some groups are sort of mixed. They might be the same faculty, but they're mixed from different courses.
Sure.
So, for example, I might have hairdressers mixed up with health and social care students, for example. So they're the same faculty that don't know each other, and they're not really friends, and then they're kind of different interests. Whereas other groups, like my creative industries, there's only 7 of them, and most of them on the same course. So that kind of feels more natural to work together. And part of that process for me is sharing my experiences from when I was younger, or like say when I was your age. I mean, that sounds a bit silly, but I did media as my first degree, so and they're doing media now, so it's a way in to chat to them. And in other groups where, for example, on our rural campus, they're all doing animal care or agriculture, they've got a common interest, so it's a bit easier to kind of chat together about things. I do use the thinking environment, which I know you are very familiar with, as a tool to a tool to definitely provide everyone with a voice in the group. And so we get to know each other through that a little bit. I don't use the thinking environment as a whole hour, but I do use it as a lead into a new topic or a particular task we're doing. For example, recently we had a topic of tattoos, which people do practice. So a discussion about tattoos, and that was something everyone had an opinion on, and that kind of helped the group to realize that they're all aligned in the same ideas. But I don't have any magic wand. Sorry, to make groups gel.
Well, no, I think I've identified one. As you've just said, finding contentious topics or topics that people can relate to, people can talk about. Particularly if they've been, if they have learned to listen to each other. I think that's, and I think that is something that we can feed back on. We can say, you're not listening to each other. You should be listening to each. These are the benefits of listening to each other. You get different ideas from each other. You become more informed. You can think about whether people are right or wrong. We build up tolerance. We build up respect for each other. I don't know. That's what I've done in my classes, so that people learn to listen to each other, which I find is quite is the first step for bonding. But having said that, obviously, once once they step out of the classroom, rather, they bond quite naturally, don't they? They listen,
Yes.
they listen to each other and everything else. I'm not a part of it anymore, but I don't know. I suppose I haven't actually thought of utilizing the thinking environment in my classes. So, I think we'd need to. I need to ask you to tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah. I use it as partly use it as crowd control, to be honest, to create calm and order and quiet, and like you just said, to instill the idea of mutual respect and of taking time to listen to each other, but also mainly use it as a way to generate ideas. So if we're talking about a particular topic, if we will discuss it, then you're going to have a wider range of things to write about, and you than do it by yourself. So I use it in that way. But I also use it as crowd control at the very beginning. I have some very rowdy groups where we always do at the beginning. So a round of how are you? Literally, how are you? And then a question that's linked into the topic we're doing on that particular lesson. So it's used for topic-based discussion to lead into a particular task, crowd control, but also get to know each other, and like you said, encouraging the group to listen to each other and show respect and take turns with that important stuff.
I think you've mentioned it. Really start off the year by introducing the thinking environment as a way of allowing discussion to take place, allowing listening to each other to take place, and mutual respect.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishing professional development books and resources to support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Have you checked out their latest releases? Use the code JCTTR2324 for 20% off your order. Don't miss out. Visit johncattbookshop.com to explore their full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. Happy reading.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
The BBC News channel and news website features an interview with a secondary head teacher 1 year on from an incident in his school which resulted in a lockdown. Head teacher Kieran Stapleton confronted a male who had entered the school building, telling office staff he had a gun. The man has since been detained indefinitely in a secure psychiatric hospital. Mr. Stapleton talks of confronting the man on the corridors while staff followed lockdown procedures, locking classrooms, pulling down blinds and asking pupils to hide under desks and remain calm and silent. Mr. Stapleton used the interview to highlight the issue of mental health and the importance of support for young people in order to avoid instances of violence. He also pointed to the bravery of staff and pupils and the way they responded to the lockdown that was not a drill. The business section of the BBC News site focuses on the impact the post office scandal has had on the children of sub-postmasters. A group set up to support those affected was organised by Katie Downey, whose father was made bankrupt trying to repay money after the Horizon system failed. Ms Downey was 11 when the family moved to France, and she stopped talking for 2 years. She set up the group Lost Chances for the Children of Sub-Postmasters as a way to support those affected, but is also trying to gain compensation for the changed lives. The group has 40 members so far, and many talk of difficult home lives, bullying at school, and feelings of shame after parents were accused. Some also shared experiences of poor mental health, eating disorders, and panic attacks. The group wants members of the public and other groups and agencies to understand how such trauma can affect children and young people. This is so that they are no longer considered as too remote from the harms caused, simply because the harm was not directly inflicted upon them. The holy month of Ramadan began earlier this month, and many schools have made arrangements to support pupils and staff who are fasting. This is something that many schools have done for years, but this year staff shortages have meant that some schools have had to modify their usual procedures. Schools report difficulties in supervising pupils who are fasting in spaces away from food and drink, as they struggle to find additional staff or enough cover for absent staff. One primary school in the east of England resorted to asking parents to take fasting pupils home for the lunch period due to significant staff shortages. Parents expressed frustration at the request, with some quoted by East England News as saying it was insensitive and ridiculous. Some did point out that the school has often been supportive in the past and that it is proud of its multicultural awareness. The school said it was working hard to find a solution to the issue, but could not compromise pupil safeguarding. Difficulties in recruitment, retention and accessing supply staff are an ongoing challenge for many schools. The University of Cambridge is scrapping its state school targets for undergraduate admissions, according to the Telegraph newspaper. The university said it would take candidate schools into account when selecting students, but would no longer have a target for the share of state and private schools pupils gaining places. Cambridge has been accused of discriminating against pupils from private schools amid a decline in offer rates at top independent schools. Vice-Chancellor Deborah Prentice said there is no discrimination, but competition is fiercer as state school pupils have been increasingly encouraged to apply. The targets were originally introduced to increase the portion of state-educated undergraduates from 63.4% to 69.1% by 2024-25. The university has beaten its target with 72.9% of new students in 2022-23 coming from state schools. Finally, a head teacher's letter to parents on the subject of poor quality school meals has gone viral. The letter was sent after issues with the school's catering provider, Chartwell's, led to complaints from pupils over quality and portion sizes. In the letter, the head teacher says he would be exceptionally unhappy if his own children were served the food and asks, how difficult is it to bake a potato? Whilst the letter focuses on issues with food service, it has highlighted the problems schools face around private finance initiative contract management, funding issues and the impact inflation has had on the food prices, which have left some companies struggling. Some commentators have also raised the issue of the impact poor quality meals can have on pupils who receive free school meals. It's not the first time Chartwell's has been in the news, as the issue of food quality was raised during the pandemic, when the company was accused of providing poor quality food parcels to families during school closures. Chartwell's said it was working with the school to rectify issues and acknowledged that the service had fallen well below the high standards we demand. This has been your Teachers Talk Radio News with Joe Fox.
Back. Matthew Ruddle has talked about providing feedback, peer support, the thinking environment, and so much more. Matthew, I have a question now about constructive criticism. How do you feel about the term? And is there a more approachable concept that teachers can adopt?
I find that phrase a bit problematic because criticism implies that someone's doing something wrong or aren't doing something well enough.
Yeah.
We use the what went well kind of framework in our college. So we're encouraged to comment on something a student has done effectively, no matter how big or small that is, followed by even better if, or I prefer to use next time. So I'll say, I noticed that you've used very clear paragraphs in your piece of writing. The next time, could you try and use a wider range of sentences, for example, as a very simple example. to try and make it, well, in fact, I try and make the feedback really more of a feed forward, I guess.
Yes.
Looking forward rather than back too much.
Yeah. So next time, definitely.
Next time, yeah. So trying to be less critical and more helpful, I think. That's my approach.
So, as far as you and I are both concerned, constructive criticism can definitely go into room 101.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yes, it is, isn't it? It's more, you've done this really well. I could see that this has been consolidated. This is working for you. Next time, I was thinking, as soon as you mentioned paragraphs, I thought, well, next time I'd like to see discourse markers. I'd like to see linkers between the paragraphs. I'd like you to see if you can link your ideas together. There's so much, as you said, feed forward that you can give to learners to help them improve. And as soon as I've always thought, as soon as I say, well, I'd like to offer some constructive criticism, I can almost see their shoulders shrink. And I think, no, there's a better phrase than that.
Yeah.
You talked about how, giving a learner feedback based on where they started and where they are now, I think gave them more confidence in approaching the mock exams. Have you have you ever experienced a time when a student has made a breakthrough that came directly from the feedback that you've given them? So they've seen, they've made an improvement, maybe that exceeded what your expectations were.
I have, and it's usually, not always, usually a confidence thing, where someone has written, let's say, a short story, and I've read it and I've asked them, face to face, oh, what, how do you feel about it? And like, oh, it's not very good. It's a bit rubbish. And I'll go through it with them, identify together the techniques they've used, for example, similes or metaphors or particularly interesting setting, and I'll explain to them, this is great. You've done this, this, and this, and gone through kind of a checklist of what they need to do in order to succeed in that question. At the end, I've said to them, how do you feel about it now? And like, oh, now I can see that I've actually done okay. And the next time they did question 5, write a story, they approached it with more confidence and were able to look at it themselves before I even got to them, and I could see that they already felt better about it. So I think it helped them to believe in themselves a lot more, rather than waiting for me to say, well done on that. So definitely in terms of confidence, it's hard to think of an example where someone's made a big leap just from a comment I've said or written down. It's more questioning, I think. I tend to put questions in my feedback as well. So it's something like, how could you rewrite that last sentence to make it clearer? Or how could you describe the forest in a more effective way?
Sure.
And then later on, the next piece, you can see they've taken it on board and have thought about it a bit more. So I think for me, it's more of a confidence thing, and then seeing it appear, manifest in the next thing they do.
Now, we're thinking about feedback that's gone to you now as a teacher. Have you ever had feedback that has, dramatically improved your practice? And what was it?
Yes, I think of two times, two occasions actually.
Lovely.
The first time was way back in Japan. So I taught in Japan in 1999 for 3 years.
Yeah.
And there, I didn't have any feedback at all from anyone.
Harsh.
From any colleagues or just nobody. The only time it ever happened was when a primary school I was working in, we created quite an innovative curriculum where the school wanted to implement English, and back then English wasn't taught in primary schools at all, so it was a new thing.
Wow.
And they created with me. We created together this sort of English/multicultural kind of lesson once a week,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a big hit. And so the local education authority came to observe our lesson, which was a
Wow.
big deal. So we were in the classroom. It was a very small school. We only had in this class there were 6 students, I think, myself, Japanese teacher, and then there were 30 people observing around the room, which is very intimidating. But afterwards, we had a meeting, just the staff and the teachers that came to observe us, and the head of the Board of Education was talking about our lesson, and it was the first time I heard someone praise what I was doing. I mean, it's in Japanese, so I was struggling to understand it, but at that point, I picked up enough to be able to get the gist of it. And that was really the only time I ever had any kind of feedback for my job in Japan. This is after I'd been there 2 years.
Wow.
And so I felt finally reassured that I was doing okay and that what I was doing was all right. And it wasn't just, a bit of fun. It's actually working well. And I was doing a good job to boost my confidence enormously after being starved of any feedback for such a long time.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry. What was the second occasion?
Second occasion, I was trying to do my AET about 4 years ago. And as part of that course, you had to teach a teach lesson,
Mm-hmm.
15
Yeah.
minutes. And I spent such a long time putting it together and making it perfect and, to tick all the boxes and the criteria. And after I taught it, the feedback from my peers was that, yes, it's a great lesson, but your personality was missing from it.
Oh, God.
And so I realized that I had spent so much time thinking about the planning and logistics of delivering it that I had kind of taken myself out of it, even though I was there.
Oh, dear.
Inject any humor into it or anything else that they knew from me. So I realized that I had to let myself shine in it, not just the pedagogy.
Yes. I think a lot of, teacher trainers do bang on about the pedagogy, with the rationale and what are you thinking? And it's like, well, I'm thinking that I'm also part of the mix. And so do you feel that, I mean, how has that gone into the mix, so to speak, when it comes to your teaching style now?
Well, now I bring into lessons things that I'm generally interested in or generally enjoy. So, for example, that's manifested as me offering choices to my learners on which text we're going to use, for example.
Oh,
so I offer them a
okay.
choice.
Yeah.
And these are things that I've actually read, so books I've read and enjoyed, and I've ended up making exam-style resources from them. And through offering that choice and then knowing I've really loved it, I think they can tell that I'm passionate about it and I really enjoy these stories. So that's one way. The other way is just bringing humor into the lesson and
Yeah, sure.
just being myself. So about 2 years ago, I decided to dress in a different way. So I wear lots of bright colors, which was partly an experiment to see if it was true that you could kind of alter your, not emotions necessarily, but I guess there's some things. Yeah, I was trying to boost my feelings by dressing brightly. And since then, that's sort of a metaphor, I suppose, for allowing your personality to shine and being you. So now I'm known for wearing bright red shoes, trainers, and different other outfits and things. So it's been a confidence booster, I should say. Yeah. If I'm confident, just dressing like that and being myself rather than. And this goes back to Japan. Actually, in Japan, I tried to be this sort of facsimile teacher because I didn't know how to do it. So I copied the teachers around me. In Japan, everyone had to wear suits and ties and shirts, and it's very bland. And I wasn't very good at that. I didn't know what I was doing, so I kind of mimicked them. But after a few months, I realised that, again, same story, I had to kind of be myself. And I bring in Japanese cultural icons that I liked, for example, that students would know and interact with.
Oh, right, yeah.
It's kind of been the same, but in different cultures, different times of my life.
Yeah. So, as a final question, if you were to advise a new teacher on how to offer feedback and how to help learners to improve, what advice would you give?
That's a great question. I would suggest they try and make it as natural as possible. So,
Sure.
like, conversationally, and try and make it a two-way thing, not just the teacher telling the student what I've done wrong, what to do better, but asking questions to them and getting them to think about it as well and to chat about it in a more natural way. But also not to write too much in their books for feedback. They won't read it anyway. So try and, be succinct, encouraging, and friendly, I guess.
Lovely.
I would say.
Lovely words to end by. Matthew, thank you so much for coming on to my show. And I wish you all the best with the mocks with your learners. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. You're welcome, Toby. Thank you. Take care.
Okay. Take care. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.